Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can also find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The information shared on this program is informational and should not be considered therapy. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
Hello and welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast, where we go after shame every freaking way we can get after it. I am so excited for our guest and our topic today, but before I go into that, let me just catch you up on really quick upcoming events that are coming up quickly. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is I have my next ethical non-monogamy group starting on May 5th. I'm doing this in partnership with the Sanctuary here in Salt Lake City. It will be available online for sure, so you can join us from anywhere. And depending on how many people we get, we may also do it in person. It is a limited group. We try to keep it to no more than about 25 couples, although individuals can come as well if you're single or if you're part of a triad or a quad or anything like that. And that's a 7-week group. And people love it. It's a great way to not only get a lot of skills and questions and answered, and it's for people who are just starting and people also who've been in the lifestyle for a while. I will say it's primarily focused on people who have started their relationships in monogamous marriages and are now maybe either divorced or opening up, and they're, curious about ethical non-monogamy. So even if you've not done anything, this is a good group for you. And if you're already, in the lifestyle and facing all the common issues that come up in any relationship structure, then we address a lot of those as well. And what people like about it most is the community part of it, which gets me to my next event, which is actually the day before on May 4th. If you have been through one of these groups, I'm on my 8th group, I think right now. We've decided everybody wants reunion time. So they love being part of these community groups. So the first Monday of every month, if you've been through one of these groups, we invite you to come back and we'll do kind of 201 material, right? And ongoing check-ins, and you still get that community perspective, etc. So if you're interested in ethical non-monogamy, there's a lot of resources for you there. The next thing is on May 9th, which is the Saturday before Mother's Day, which I know it's Mother's Day weekend and you may already have plans. However, what a wonderful way to treat yourself or treat your wife or the mother of your children or your friend to a Reclaiming Female Sexuality one-day retreat. We're going to have lunch. We're going to have some lecture. We're going to have a lot of experiential stuff. I'm so excited to do this. I've done it before. It's always been a blast. So if you can join me on May 9th, you will definitely, well, I can't guarantee anything, but I think you will love it. It will be a lot of fun. That's all done through natashahelfer.com. I also run a group practice, Symmetry Counseling, and through Symmetry Counseling, we run a free faith transition support group for anybody who's leaving a high demand religion, high control group. So we primarily have a lot of Latter-day Saints. That's the tradition that I come from, or ex-Mormons or people who are transitioning, but we also get people from other traditions, Jehovah's Witnesses, Catholics. We've had a few Muslim people show up. So if that's something you're going through, we offer that as a free service. And that's the first Wednesday of every month. I go in person here in Cottonwood Heights, Utah, or you can also join us online. And we also have a weekly group that's only online, but for the first Wednesday of the month, I join you for that. And you can find all the information for that at our Symmetry Counseling website, which is simcounseling.com. Okay, I think that's all I have for upcoming events. So thank you for bearing with me. Now to the real reason why we're here. I am so excited to have a friend and colleague, Becky Bowles. She's a licensed clinical social worker based in Mill Creek, Utah. She's the owner of Through the Woods Counseling, where she works with individuals navigating recovery from narcissistic abuse and many other traumatic experiences, including a focus on faith, religious or spiritual betrayal, and trauma from high control religious and spiritual systems. She also provides coaching for recovery from narcissistic abuse for those outside the state of Utah. She offers a warm and inviting space for healing, which I can attest to, and helps victims and survivors of abuse learn how to thrive. Her approach is eclectic, and she uses narrative, somatic, spiritual, nature, and embodied modalities, as well as EMDR for trauma work in the state of Utah. Her main focus is helping people use their autonomy to live an authentic and meaningful life. She also just recently launched a personal project, which we'll be making sure you have in the links and in the show notes, on YouTube, called Dear Becky B. And that's spelled BEE, like the insect, Dear Becky B, where she shares her own personal experiences regarding narcissistic abuse and education regarding the topic. So welcome, Becky, to the program. So happy to have you.
Thank you, Natasha. I'm really excited to be here. A little bit nervous, but really excited to be here and really excited to chat with you today about some things that are really important to me and that I think can be really important for other people.
Yeah, so important. And, you and I have had a chance to chat before, our today's episode. And I know that you're doing a really brave thing, which is not just coming and talking to us about your clinical experience with this topic, but you're also going to delve into some personal narratives as well, which is always a whole nother level of vulnerability, which I think people really appreciate when we as the clinicians can also get real and get personal with folks. So I'm really appreciative for that and can totally understand why you'd have some nerves coming in.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, as a survivor, learning how to thrive after this type of abuse, being vulnerable like this, it can be really intense, but meaningful and powerful for me too. So
yeah, right. We'll get into all this, but your system has taught you to protect yourself and stay quiet, stay silent, don't cause any rifts, and so
right. And I was I'm really drawn to your work, and because I think of the shame piece that goes along with being a person who has been abused, right? So
yeah. Right, because our nervous systems are, when we're open, are going, don't do that. That's scary.
Yeah,
dangerous, right?
Yeah,
so it can be a lot to. It can be a lot to be open. Well, so let's start there. As much as you're comfortable, I know we have certain points that we want to cover as far as the education of narcissism, especially because it seems to be one of those hot topic terms these days that a lot of people are interested in.
Totally.
Sometimes we wield words like depression or narcissism in ways that are not necessarily very clinical. They kind of tend to be taken over by the culture.
Sure.
So we'll address that as well. But how much are you comfortable just giving us a little bit of your background, where you come from? You come from Mormon background yourself. So how much do you want to say about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in the Cottonwood Heights area. In the 70s and 80s. I grew up in a part active member home. My mother was active and had been on a mission, and my dad was not. And so I kind of lived in this kind of in-between space, which kind of felt tricky to navigate. You just hear so many messages as a child in growing up in Utah, like I did anyway, that of how you were supposed to be, what was the right way to be, and the things that you should do to be happy, and the way you should live, and the ABC ... right? These steps were really heavily indoctrinated into me as a child and a teenager. And I have a couple of older half sisters. One of them has addiction issues, and the other one has issues in different areas. But but they're several years older than me, and so when they would come and visit, there would kind of be some chaos in my home. And so I kind of feel like that kind of contributed to this idea I developed over time, that because my dad was not an active member of the church, that I couldn't trust him, right? Because he couldn't answer all of the questions the right way. And so I feel like I kind of, as a way of feeling like I could prevent some of the problems my family had that I was born into, that I could, follow the church's teachings, marry a returned missionary, somebody who was an active member of the church, and just really dedicate my life to it. And things should be like, I don't know, happily ever after, right? But I discovered, I don't know, not long after I was married, that it wasn't quite as easy as I thought it was going to be. And after, I don't know, the first couple of years, I realized I was kind of in over my head, and there were things happening that I knew were not normal. But I also, through the process, it's a gradual process that, when you are in a relationship with somebody who's high in narcissistic traits, which we can talk about what that looks like, and that you I kind of see it as kind of like the same psychology as like a cult mentality, where you are gradually kind of drawn in, and then you believe this person, and you believe what they say and what they think about you, right? And so for me, that's kind of how I started. And I was married to him for almost 22 years, and we had 5 children. And it took one of my children having some issues to kind of really shake me and wake me up to be like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And we finally got some counseling, which was kind of, where I started learning about what was going on and how it was impacting me. And then I went back to school and ended up getting divorced. And so, yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell.
Okay.
Yeah.
So many tidbits there that I'd like to focus on. I'm sure as we go through your points, but one is, I really appreciate you saying the piece about how oftentimes it takes us seeing the harm happening to one of our children for us to be able to kind of go over that hurdle, that last hurdle, actually do something. Even as women, especially in high demand religions, we're oftentimes taught to sacrifice ourselves, to caretake. And so even if we're being abused, it feels like, well, I can, it's okay. I can handle that. I want to keep the family together. I don't want to cause more problems. And so you're willing to sacrifice yourself, but it's a whole nother thing when you start seeing it affect one of your kiddos.
Totally. And that's exactly what it was for me. I thought I could take one for the team, and in the next life, everything would be made how it should be. And then when I was divorced and learning so much about what I had been through and normal, healthy relationships, I had a period of time where I was really angry that I was a stereotype. But it is a stereotype for a reason. A lot of women, that's what it takes, right, to get out of it. Yeah.
This is incredibly challenging to be in these situations, for sure. So right off the bat, we just want to normalize that, because I think like you're saying, it's easy to fall into shame about that, like, yes, why didn't I do something sooner? Or why did I do that? Or even shame about leaving, was it that bad?
Oh my God. Yes, very much. So shame all the way around there. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you remember, but it feels like recently, and by recently, I mean like in the last 5 years, one of the Mormon apostles, and I believe it was Oakes, who's now the prophet, but I'm not sure. He was one of these men were giving one of these addresses to the younger, like BYU type adults. And almost kind of in a condescending way was like, yeah, if you want to marry a good person, if you want to make sure you're going to get married correctly, all you have to do is marry somebody who's following gospel principles. And I heard that and I was just like, are these men just so uninformed? Of course, half of them probably are exhibiting a lot of narcissistic traits themselves, but
yeah, I would agree.
Like, what? Yeah. That is not, people can be doing all kinds of things in the church or showing up in very charismatic ways, very, in ways that the community would think, wow, what an amazing person. And it's a completely different story once you're in a relationship with them and at home.
Yeah. And even like, in my situation from the outside looking in, my ex-husband, everybody thought he was great. He went to, he served in the church, in the ward in the state. He went to almost every service project, just a lot of those things. And when I finally decided to start talking about what was happening, which took me a very long time to do, it was just all this, what? But no, he's so good, right? And it just created this space where very few people believed me when I was telling what was happening in our home.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Very, very upsetting. So let's just go right into then maybe our first point, which is let's explain kind of the criteria for what is called narcissistic personality disorder, or otherwise known as NPD. And you also kind of use the language of traits. I think before 30 years ago or whatever, when I was trained, it was kind of like you either have it or you don't. Now it seems like it's more, you still can be diagnosed, like you have it or you don't.
Sure.
More like you're somewhere on the spectrum, right? Because a lot of these personality disorders, you read them, they can read like a horoscope, and many of us have some of these traits, or at times exhibit some of these traits.
Absolutely.
That's different than like being diagnosed with an actual personality disorder. So can you help understand that better?
Sure. And I think I also understand there are other personality disorders that have narcissism as one of their criteria, right? So it can, I think, show up in a lot of different types of disordered personalities. But for somebody to meet the DSM-5 criteria, I think they need to have like a pervasive pattern of grandiosity. And I'm not sure how much defining you think we need to do with some of this, but we can define some of these.
What do we mean by grandiosity?
Yeah. And I think it's, this, I don't know, maybe people have heard delusions of grandeur, right? Where people have like this notion that they believe they are better than everyone else at whatever it is, right? And they know better, they are better. But that's like a pervasive pattern in their life to be diagnosed. They have like a need for a lot of admiration. They also show a lack of empathy for others. And this usually begins by early adulthood, from what I understand, these traits. And they need to have at least 5 of 9 specific features that present across contexts. I'm kind of quoting this from the DSM right now. So it includes like an inflated sense of self-importance. So like they're kind of like an inflation, right, of how important they really are. And that's what they believe, right? More important than others. A preoccupation with fantasies, belief in being special, different, better, any of those things. They require, I mentioned this one already, require excessive admiration, and they have a sense of entitlement, exploitative behavior, and the lack of empathy. They also have envy and arrogant attitudes. And so those are the main criteria.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just kind of add my thoughts to that as far as what it might look like. So the entitlement is kind of like this idea that, feeling like I should be treated a certain way. I should be given exceptions that maybe other people don't get because I have I deserve them somehow, right?
Right. Totally. Yeah.
And then the exploitation is kind of like, it's kind of like, well, of course, I don't even think necessarily that they're waking up in the morning going, it's not like this evil, like, I want to ruin people's lives. It's just like this integral, like, yeah, of course this has to meet my needs. Like, why would it be otherwise? You know, and if it's not doing something for me, why would I even consider it and expect others to be very self-focused? I almost feel like, you know, our toddlers are very narcissistic, like they're 2 and 3 years old, and they're like, well, why wouldn't
and appropriately probably
that's an appropriate time to be narcissistic. You're like, the world revolves around me, right, Mom? And if I'm crying and if I'm hungry, everybody should care about my discomfort. And you kind of don't grow out of that. That's kind of the reality, is you're acting in a way like a toddler would, and everybody else's needs are less important than your own. Therein comes that like lack of empathy. They're very fragile. They they can dish it out.
Yes.
They can be very critical of others, but if you say one little thing about them,
watch out. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, and I'm not afraid to say it. I mean, I can't diagnose you haven't met, but if anybody wants to see a classic narcissism 101 example right now in front of our faces every day, it's our current president of the United States.
Oh, 1,000%. Yes.
Very clear things. And it doesn't mean that they can't be nice at times.
Right.
It doesn't mean that they can't be charming. It doesn't mean that they can't even feign a certain sense of humility. Like,
totally.
Yes, of course. But when it really comes down to the rubber meets the road, their needs are not primarily taken care of. It's kind of a shit show.
Yes, absolutely. And then they have all, a lot of, toddler-like behavior, tantrums and lashing out and externalizing blame for their behavior, right? It just, everyone else is at fault for what they do.
Right. So, reflection of responsibility is a huge one. It's a huge one.
Yeah.
Really any personality disorder. It's not my fault. I don't know why this is happening to me. Yes, this is the 10th time I'm having relational issues in my life, but it can't be about me. There's no
right
here, right? It's always about somebody else's problem. Right. Which we know in good relationships, there's a mixture, right, of both self-responsibility and also partner responsibility. Right off the bat, if you are partnered with a narcissist, you're going to not have that give and take of an acknowledgement that we're both contributing to problems.
Right.
All right. So then let's go right into Mormonism in particular, because we both come from, but again, we're not only high demand religion out there, but I think you'd like to talk, I mean, in a sense, Mormonism has a foundation of narcissistic traits as an organization. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. The way I see this, the way I have made sense of my experiences and the way I see this now, I see the church that I grew up in, that I was raised in, and that I dedicated so much of my life to as this religious system that was founded by, like you just said, with some pretty narcissistic traits, right? Like, one of the articles of faith is, I forget which one, but it's like honoring, obeying, and sustaining the law, right? But right from the start, Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, Wilford Woodruff, I don't know, that could be a long topic, I guess, but they all didn't think they had to obey the laws of the land of the United States because they had this special mission from God to restore the true church on earth. And this idea that Joseph was visited by the Godhead and had this first vision, which, when I found out how many different versions there were of that, I was kind of angry that I felt kind of lied to about that, but I don't want to go on tangents, but yeah, this foundation of okay, I'm a prophet. I don't have to follow the rules, the sense of entitlement. and this, I would say, lack of empathy for how women were treated by them, right? This whole idea that like they could have as many wives as they wanted and how they went about doing that, right? Like Joseph Smith sending men on missions and then marrying their wives while they're gone, and kind of that coercion, like that coercive control, like, well, this is how I'm the prophet and this is how you'll get into heaven, right? These kinds of concepts I feel like kind of really fit this criteria that we're talking about.
Absolutely. I mean, all religions, I think, even the ones who have gotten more flexible over time, began with a charismatic leader, right? Usually, especially if you're in the high demand spaces, it's a leader who is demanding like obedience and loyalty, and who they're positioning themselves in this kind of in an idea that I have a privileged access to higher power.
Yeah.
And that makes me able to actually run your life. It's not just about me and my life. Like now I have the right to run other people's lives. And this has been such an interesting thing as I've treated so many people, especially from our own faith, is that I see a lot of folks who I don't think that they have narcissistic personality disorder naturally.
Right.
They're taught in church settings to act those ways. Right? They're told you have the priesthood, you are special, you have this special power, you have power to come up with revelation for other people under your stewardship. You don't have to have NPD yourself to basically be taught to act narcissistic.
No, I agree with you. And I think that, the way our church is set up with that, I think creates that space, right? Like, because when men are taught these things, that they hold the priesthood and they preside over the home and they're going to be gods one day, and women are taught to be submissive and obedient and, helpful, and to kind of outsource our own knowing, right? Like I could pray about something, but then I would have to run it by my husband or my bishop to make sure I got it right. You know what I mean? It's like, and so I think it creates for men who are predisposed to wanting to hold power or control over their families, which is like the foundation of abuse, is power and control, then it just really gives them the tools to do it. And it's sanctioned, I would say, even because
the stamp of approval from God, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's, and not that all men in particular, not that women can't be, narcissistic by any means.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
In patriarchal systems, it does, I think, men in particular to be more vulnerable to narcissism, and women be the victims of narcissism. Yes.
Right. Yeah. And I think it can actually even make women be, I don't love the term codependent, but that it puts them in that position where they think they have to kind of, this is what my husband's going to be. I have to make sure he does it. Right. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that a big part of this is control. So let's forward. Hopefully so far we've given you some criteria. We've talked about the intersection between high demand religion and narcissism. But narcissism, you can have folks who are narcissistic being a stamp of approval by their religious community, and you can have narcissistic people being taught how to act in narcissistic ways. And I would say, like, for example, every disciplinary counsel that I've been through, especially my excommunication, I thought was very narcissistic. I'm not necessarily saying that all of the men who were involved in that process had narcissistic personality disorder, but they're kind of like, oh, this is my duty. I have to do this thing that I've been told I need to do. And so you're still acting in ways that are very harmful for power. So let's talk in specific about coercive control. What do we mean by coercion? And why is that, like, specifically, I think, what I want to say, connected to like power differentials?
Yeah. So, coercive control, I believe, is a way of controlling people by coercion, right? Like, I, mm, so a good example of that in my marriage was, I'll just share a quick story about that. So my ex-husband was a person who wanted a no-shoe house, right? So people would come in, were expected to take off their shoes. So we were having a family gathering. I hadn't really seen my dad for as much for a couple of years because I'd had a falling out with him over a conflict that we had when my dad had asked me if I was being abused. And this was one of the first times that my whole family was gathering at my house since that had happened. And so we're sitting in the living room. I don't know, it must have been a birthday party or something. And my ex-husband just gave me a look and, looked over at my dad's feet with his eyes, right? And I looked and I'm like, oh, my dad has his shoes on. And so I knew that my ex-husband was going to be upset about that. So in front of everybody, I asked my dad to remove his shoes. He was already in the house, already sitting down, right? But that's an example of how that coercion impacted me, like, because I was very much in this position where I tried to prevent his outbursts and his anger and the repercussions of those for a lot of reasons. So that's one example of how I did that. And I think an example for the church is this idea that, like, that's the only religion that lets families be together in the afterlife, whatever that looks like, right? None of us really know what's going to happen when we die. Nobody actually really knows. But that's one of their selling points, is that you do these things and you will be with your family together forever. And if somebody loses a loved one or is vulnerable or something susceptible to that, I feel like that's a way they can coerce somebody into staying into the church or joining the church so they can be with their family forever.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, control, if we want to be just direct, is forcing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a force.
Right.
Or somebody forces you into the car, or
Mm-hmm.
coercive control is getting somebody to do what you want.
Yeah.
More wily means, right? So the church is expert at this, right? They'll say, well, everybody has agency, right? We're not forcing anybody, everybody has the right. But guess what? You're only going to get the benefits that everybody would want if you do what we expect you to do, right? Like get to
absolutely. Yeah.
Some things that I think are common are like isolation tactics, gaslighting, like challenging personality, controlling finances, especially marriages, micromanaging things like your shoe example, whether or not you're wearing certain clothes or cooking certain foods in a
absolutely
Jewish heritage, where there's a kind of a crappy story about one of my great grandparents being super mad that the food wasn't prepared kosher and anyways. It's like
right, absolutely. And I mean, I have so many examples of that in my marriage where I just knew that if I didn't try to make my kids do what they were supposed to do, or if I didn't do things the way he wanted me to, like, there would be an explosion somehow, right? And so that's kind of where the control came in, and the power, like, I feel like the control was from the church too, because I really believed that, like, we were going to be this eternal family and be together forever. And I had I don't even know how long it took me to internalize that these things that were happening were my fault. But, like, if I didn't do better, like, all this shame and guilt that I wasn't doing enough to prevent these things, right? And so it kind of really was a mind fuck for me, like, and pardon my F-bomb, but, like, it's I just don't know how else to say
It's a
it.
very appropriate F-bomb. A very appropriate one when you're dealing with these kinds of dynamics. So yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and I think sometimes the ways it can feel so like, again, it's I mean, I do remember this story from church, which I think is a good one. It's like they say, you know, if you throw a frog or a toad into a hot boiling water, it jump out, right?
Right.
Put them in there and you kind of just turn it up slowly. Die because it will not have noticed the shift and change, and this is exactly what this is like. And it often starts small criticisms, even jokes like, but jokes that are making fun of you and that are down, and you're supposed to be like, if you're offended, then it's classical. Just kidding. What's wrong with you? Why are you so sensitive? Right?
Exactly. All those things. Yeah.
So it's very slow going, and it really creates this space where the person who's the victim is just, self-blame. You mentioned self-blame, internalizing self-blame, trying to control, starting to feel like you're walking on eggshells, monitoring the children, making sure not too much noise or getting, you know, dad mad or those kinds of
all the things. Yeah.
So the next two questions I have for you, one is like, and maybe we've kind of already dabbled in this, but when you're born into these systems that use coercive control as far as like what they're role modeling as part of the church system, and they're role modeling grandiosity, right? Like we're the only ones, we're the one and right way, there's no other way.
And entitlement too, modeling that they're entitled to our time, our money, like
like, you want to say no, that seems selfish, like we're the problem, we're not the problem, right? And
we don't apologize for anything.
Don't apologize. If you are blessed, we're going to give credit to us, the church, and God. If you're having a problem, well, obviously you're not doing the program well enough. It's not our fault ever that you have a problem.
Right.
No accountability.
Yeah.
So if you are born into that kind of system, how does that then trickle down for justification of abuse in your mind?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, maybe because, you know, for men, I'm going to say, like, if they feel like that's what's been given to them in this patriarchal system, right? I think there's also this hierarchy of men, right? And if you know, men aren't, you know, getting leadership positions or, you know, excelling that way, they may feel like it's because there's something wrong with what's going on in their homes and in their families. Maybe things aren't good enough, right? And I can see how that could be put on their wives or their children, especially. I don't know, it makes me think of like being a teenager, right? And being taught that like what I wore affected boys and men, right? I couldn't dress in a way that would make them have impure thoughts, right? Or you couldn't say no to somebody who asked you to dance or whatever, right? At a church dance. And so I feel like it kind of is this subtle and unspoken but spoken way of like creating this responsibility to be on other people besides yourself. If you're a man with the priesthood in charge of a family, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that in a lot of ways, you're treating your family like the church is treating you.
Absolutely, right? Yeah, absolutely.
And I've talked to a lot of people too, where I think it's almost even harder to accept that they had a narcissistic mother, because the mother is supposed to be submissive and loving and caring, but she's very like self-centered. And oftentimes, if they're also religious, they're using their religion as a weapon of power.
Right.
Righteous, to feel justified, to So it really can affect either gender for sure, or, you know, talking about kind of binary gender, family system.
Yeah.
What do you have to say how the system sets up the victims then, like, because in a sense, we're being trained to submit.
Mm-hmm.
What
Mm-hmm.
are the vulnerabilities there for relational dysfunction, like for people like you?
Yeah, for me, I feel like the vulnerabilities were, oh gosh, this may just be me, but I feel like I had a very idealistic view of what it was supposed to be and what the church would be and what it would look like if I gave it my all, right? And just kind of setting me up in a way that I felt like when I realized I wasn't in the situation that I thought I would be and it wasn't going the way I thought it would, that because I had already kind of been conditioned and prepared to take responsibility that wasn't mine to take for other people's actions, like, men controlling their own emotions or sexual urges or whatever, right? Like that responsibility was given to all of us women at a young age. That I feel like that just kind of carries over and makes you more vulnerable, for me anyway, to feel like because of these things, I've been taught like I need to be submissive and I need to be support him in his role. I made a covenant in the temple that I would do this, and I believe it. And the problem must be me because he's still allowed to do these things with the church. And, I knew that he had gone and talked to bishops before about his behavior, and I had never gone with him when we'd had some sort of episode. And I naively thought he was talking about his behavior, but towards the end of the marriage and when we were going through the divorce, I slowly began to realize that he had kind of been setting the foundation for me to look a little bit crazy when he would go and have these interviews, right? And instead of like taking accountability for his own behavior and his own choices and how he was acting, it was because of what I had done or said or my own emotions or PMS or whatever, right? It was just foundationally, I feel like, placed on me to hold that for him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So the first theme I'm noticing you talk about is almost like a naivete. We're taught to be instead
right.
of taught to be critical thinkers, to have boundaries. You're setting it up like, oh, a bishop is a man of God and they could never hurt you and they only have your best intents in mind. You're just taught to give your trust away freely without the trust having been earned.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
Kind of like back to that talk that was given by whoever it was, it's just like, just marry somebody who is following the gospel, and
right.
Anything more than that. Be naive. It sets you up to be non-boundaried, and times, and especially even here recently with some of the changes that they've done in the LDS Church in particular, with women going on missions, being allowed to go on missions even earlier, with the express goal that they will then marry earlier. Young, non-boundaried, naive.
Yes, inexperienced.
No power of their own, no earning potential of their own.
No.
In a situation where now things start happening, it's so easy to get trapped.
Yes, and I agree with you. And it hurts my heart. It makes me really worried for all of these girls going out there and doing these things at that age, and how it has the potential to really set them back and set them up to be in relationships that are how can they even know what they want really when they're that age, Yeah.
So you're naive. You are realizing the nuclear family. This is my And then if you have, you're attached to a husband who is starting to behave in these ways, you're supposed to be kind. You're supposed to be forgiving.
I mean, the forgive 7 times 70 thing really messed with me, right? Like, yeah.
If you're not supposed to be a nag, you're supposed to be nice.
No.
Now let's add the sexual component, because, you've got to offer sex, because only the two of you can express any sexualities with each other. So now you're responsible for his sexual needs.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, this just starts piling up so hard.
I know. And it's so much weight for a woman to carry, and then I feel like we also carry the responsibility for the children, right? And their success, and in the church, right? Like I don't know, I just used to feel the judgment or see the judgment, or was the judger. Like, how worthy is that family? How are they doing? Like, what's wrong with their kids, right? Like, why, you know what I mean? Just it creates this whole space where I don't know, it just gives me the ick thinking about like how much judgment there is, and like how much expectation to have this family that looks very perfect, that has no flaws, and does everything that you're supposed to do,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and in our church in particular, although even in churches where there is professional clergy, because I spent so much time in evangelical land, land over in the Bible Belt in Kansas, a lot of times when women will go in, or victims of abuse will go in saying, hey, this is happening at home, or I'm scared, they'll oftentimes get untrained professionals, definitely in the church. But even the trained professionals oftentimes lean towards this like forgiveness narrative. We'll work with your husband, but you just make sure you keep things nice at home, and onus back on the victim for not provoking the abuser.
Absolutely. And that's what I experienced too when I first started speaking for myself with this stuff, which took me way too long to do. But when I finally did it, so a funny story, my ex-husband was a member of the High Council in our stake. And before they gave him that calling, I had to go talk to the stake president myself. And he asked me if there was anything happening in our home that would make him unworthy to hold this calling, right? And I said no, because I was terrified and embarrassed, and it was whatever, right? And I felt really guilty that I told him no. So, a few months later, I went back in and said, I need to talk to you. I lied to you about this, but this is what's happening. He gets really violent. He has the hair trigger temper. And if the stake president had come to our house to look at a pickup truck my ex-husband wanted to sell, and when he came, the windshield was broken out. And I told him, the stake president, when you looked at that truck with the broken windshield, he had broken that when he was angry. And this is, in front of all of us. And the stake president just said to me something along the lines of well, none of these men here are perfect.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And it was a no big deal. So.
Wow. It's just so, it's hard not to get ragey over this kind of stuff.
It's really hard not to get ragey. And I have a lot of people why are you so mad? Can't you get over this? Well,
no,
I cannot.
No, not only for ourselves who have lived some of this, but the fact that it's consistently, continually happening with nothing.
Yes.
Zero trauma informed care given.
Yes.
Organizations.
Yeah.
Church in that category.
So absolutely. A
reason why, if one of my favorite stories, whether you believe in it literally or not, in the Bible, is when Jesus Christ just starts taking tables, throwing them around, right? There's something called righteous anger, and righteous anger exists for a very protective and motivating factor.
Yeah, I agree. And I think so many people that I used to be close to were really uncomfortable with my anger about what I had been through, what was, still happening. There were also many years of post-separation abuse because we had minor children, and also very problematic and very challenging to go through and not understood by church leaders. So,
and often not picked up by custody evaluators.
No.
Now you have to co-parent with. Divorce does not really solve the problem,
right?
Because you still have to have a relationship with this person, especially if you have that you're raising together. One of our listeners, Nicole, saying, "I've learned so much from you both through these past few years after leaving the church. You're both doing life-saving work. Becky, so proud of you for being so vulnerable and brave. I adore you. Natasha, you keep being the badass you are." Gotta go, but I'll rewatch the rest later. So thanks, Nicole.
Oh, I love Nicole. She's great. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I thought we'd end with kind of a little thing that I found as far as red flags of a narcissistic church environment and how
wonderful.
Healthier churches are doing it.
Yeah.
I'd like for everybody to think about this too.
Okay.
Applies to at home too, right? Like, so there's 4 things that this kind of quickly went over. So the first one was accountability. So in a narcissistic abusive setting, the lead pastor or bishop or rabbi, whoever, is untouchable, right?
Right.
Boy, do we have that in Mormonism, right?
Oh my gosh. It's like one of our
even if we're wrong, you're still supposed to follow us.
I know. I mean, it's one of our founding principles, I would say, is the leaders don't have to have accountability.
Yeah. There's no governing body. So in a healthy church, leaders are answerable to the congregation and to the board. And so they have systems set in place where actually the leader is not untouchable all the way up to the top, and they can be removed or they can be reported. And I know the Catholic Church was awful with this, which is why they got sued out the wazoo with perpetrators, is they would not hold them accountable. They just move them around to other diocese and more victims vulnerable to people who were not getting sex offender treatment or whatever accountability they needed.
Yeah. Well, and from what I understand, that's also happening in the LDS Church. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
With the most recent example being one of our apostles' own brothers, right? Jefferson's brother.
Yeah.
Having been, and a lot of this too, it's like the church, and this goes back to the entitlement and the specialness. Like, we're above the law. We don't need to be mandatory reporters. We'll just do an in-house repentance process, and that will be how we will solve the problem. Again, with zero understanding that has nothing to do with helping a sexual perpetrator not perpetrate.
Right. Well, I have a lot to say about that too with my own personal experience, but another time. But yeah, it's very much my experience too that happened. Yeah.
They're using repentance instead of counseling or the authorities to be involved. And so another trait was, or another feature was conflict. So how does the church or the family system deal with conflict? So in narcissistic abusive settings, you hide the conflict to protect the brand. Right? You can't, we gotta be shiny and special. We can't show that we have any problems over here. And so we're going to put the brand over the person. Whereas in healthy church settings, conflict is discussed openly, it's addressed, and the goal is to create safety for all parties present.
I love that. Yeah.
So that's a huge one. And I get this a lot from people, from church going people, and the confusion and harm. Like, they're like, yeah, we would go to church, kind of like you're describing your ex, everybody loves my parents, or we look like the perfect family. We're involved in all the things, getting, callings or jobs that make them feel important in the community. But then at home, there's this horrific, domestic violence situation happening. And and people that, the children that come from these homes when they're sitting with us later on in therapy, that is a mind fuck to untangle, right? It's like, I didn't know.
Absolutely.
I didn't understand. Like, why are we learning all these beautiful principles at church of love and kindness? And then I watched dad, berate my mom and slap her across the face. But then at church, he had a high level calling.
I mean, one of my kids, when they were about 3 years old, I think, asked me one day what a bitch was, because they had heard their dad call me that so often, right? Like, yeah.
So it's just, it's so harmful. So the third feature was submission. And so in a narcissistic abusive setting, it's unidirectional. So only one person has to submit, which again, in the kind of system, it's like the wife submits to the husband and it's forced. Whereas submission in a healthy church, because we can submit or surrender, there's a lot of those ideas of submitting.
Absolutely.
Respect, and it's voluntary.
Yeah, and there is consent for it, right? Like, yeah.
And then the last feature was safety, which in a narcissistic and abusive setting, we're prioritizing the sanctity of the marriage or of the nuclear family, whereas in a church environment, we are prioritizing a victim's physical life.
Right.
Not the system.
I agree with that. And another experience I had when I was going through my divorce with my bishop in particular, he was very focused on trying to keep us together. That's all he cared about, really, is making sure we did not divorce. And what I learned from that experience is the traditional nuclear family is like the golden calf of Mormonism that has to, it felt like that's what was most important. That's what was worshipped, right? It didn't matter how it impacted me and the kids. What mattered was that we stayed together as a family.
Yes. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So that kind of concludes the points that we were going to try to make together today. I think you've done really great in expressing not just the clinical parts, but making it more personable. I want to just quickly talk about your YouTube channel.
Oh, yeah.
Understanding about this is that I think you're giving information, but one of the things that you're doing so cool, which is why you called it, I think, Dear Becky B, is that you are writing letters to a younger version of yourself. Is that kind of the process, and you're process, and then you're sharing that with others?
Yeah, that's what it's turned into. It's writing these letters to myself at different ages and different periods in my life, and acknowledging like what I was going through then and how hard it was, and like how hard I was trying to be good and do the right things then, even though there was so much there were so many scary and hard things happening, right? And I really believed I was doing the right thing. And I really thought that it would get better, which is part of the cycle of abuse, and how like that neurochemistry, the brain chemistry happens, and why people stay in those types of situations for longer than they feel like they should, maybe, is because of that cycle, and the hope that it's going to get better. And so like me, like writing these letters to myself is really validating who I used to be and what I believed and how hard I was trying to make something work that I really couldn't make work because it wasn't something that I could fix. And I used to really struggle with my past self, and I even had periods of time where I hated who I used to be when I was married. And a more healthier way of dealing with that for me is this kind of thing, and like giving myself grace and understanding for what I was going through and why. So,
that is such an important part, right? Is integrating our wonky selves that now we have a very different perspective on, but you were doing the best you knew how to do at the time.
Yeah.
So, it's really, Well, are there any final thoughts that you want to share with our listeners as we close? And just so you know, I plan on having Becky back probably because there's so much stuff we could talk about here with the intersection of narcissism and church and family and all that. But
I'd love to come back and talk more about this because I have a lot to say. I've been, all of this has been brewing in my mind for a lot of years. But I would just say, I think to end today, like if you are in a situation or a relationship with somebody who does not take accountability, like you mentioned with the list for the churches, I think that is the biggest red flag that you're in an unhealthy relationship. Because if both people or the system, the workplace, whatever, can't take accountability for what they're doing and how they're treating others, there's no way that's going to be healthy. So,
Yeah, I agree. And there's a lot of resources. Make sure you go follow at Dear Becky B on YouTube. I think you're also maybe on Instagram.
Yeah.
If you feel like you're in immediate danger, I mean, please reach out to professional domestic violence resources. Have them. Here in the United States, you can call or text the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. You can also text the word START to 88788. And these organizations are very adept at being very careful about your confidentiality. Like even if you look them up on the internet, they will give you directions so that nobody can follow or see that you were on their website or things like that. Because I know it can be really scary to take that first step to get help. You're petrified. Know if you do that, it could come back to bite you in the butt. So,
thanks for having those resources on here.
Well, we're talking about heavy subjects, and I know this is hard. So if you've been listening, take a deep breath. And even if you're not necessarily a victim, it's still hard to hear about these things. And especially more systemically, because I do think many of us have been victims of systemic narcissism through church systems or family systems at large, even if we're not currently married to a narcissist.
Well, and even nationally right now, we're all living in the narcissist chaos, which is something we didn't talk about today, but that's a piece we could another time, is that chaos they create. So
and it has implications. I mean, right now we're all paying more money at the gas pump. I don't mean small. I mean, it can be like, it can ruin family budgets and things to have something like that. I'm saying in the grand scheme of things, it's smaller than some of the other things that are happening. Well, Becky, thank you so much for coming on. You've been so lovely and so vulnerable and so brave, and I'm so freaking proud of you.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm really excited that I made it through this.
Yes, this is amazing. So please feel free to leave us comments, or if you need to reach out to Becky, you can find her on her YouTube channel. You can also find her at her counseling center, which I will, again, make sure that you have links to all of the ways that you can reach out to Becky personally. So thank you and have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can also find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The information shared on this program is informational and should not be considered therapy. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
There is a place where time slows to nature's pace, and there is space there to find yourself in her embrace. Some places should be left alone. Na tishki say the so we can always go to the homeland of the heart. 10,000 years of our human history etched on her canyon walls, alongside Earth's mysteries. Some places should be left alone. Nahotishki so we can always go to the homeland of the heart. To the homeland of the heart. Deep in our cities, we sleep without her stars, yet still her presence sustains us from afar. Some places should be left alone. Now tishki so we can always go to the homeland of the heart. To the homeland of the heart. To the homeland of the heart.